going to read some more translated poetry today. I have actually practiced pronouncing names this time. I have also selected some works in advance this time. I feel reasonably calm and collected today, even if I'm on my, second and a half cup of coffee. Um, So yeah, without further ado, I think I will simply hop into some poetry reading, which, gives me my deep joy. The first book that I'm going to read from is called Sandscript. This is by Jose F.A. Oliver and translated by Mark James Mueller. If I remember correctly, this individual is German. Um, and translated from the German. What I love about this work in particular is that a lot of it does kind of veer between narrative and short images toward the esoteric. Um, so I'll give you an example of a narrative poem. Do you remember back then? Over the black forest, lean the shirt-sleeved summers, the laughing around, 7 in the garden. Nearby was pray time. The neighbors celebrate today, the Jubilee. The evening before, grandchildren ride their bikes, already without training wheels. And the tails and the dead roam into valleys, reconciled shadow and sun in the arena. The hunters return alive, before the dusk, a spotted afterglow. For how much longer will the flowers defend themselves against the laughter of the hunted? A petal fell before my feet. So I think that poem is among the more narrative driven of this work, but still not exactly uh, linear or easy to follow. Here's another of his, um, which I think is an example of more of the esoteric. Love want I. Transcribe your skin onto mine. Soul drink, the heartbeat of thoughts, alms of light, the breath island, then the atoll of your name. Translate I, inhaling fever drink, I round, I moon, I half of touches, at the well, hands breaking into time ever again, hour still, an hour silent time, how else could it be tamed? Something that I eternally appreciate about this book and that I go back to often is the permission that Oliver's poems give to refuse sense. I think that there's a lot of, uh, especially in like today's information environment, there's a lot of pressure to have information digestible and parsable, to summarize everything. And I mean, how do you summarize transcribe your skin onto mine? Um, it just it's one of those opening lines that just feels like I want to yell it. Like I can feel Oliver screaming this lyric into the wind. I will be moving on though, as much as I honestly rereading some of these works makes me want to just go back and reread whole books. Um, and It's a unique kind of position to be in because I really don't reread work ever. Um, I really don't like go back for works, mostly because a lot of the time, like if I'm trying to read a new book, I will spend as much time as I need to like fully digest it. But this next book that I'll read is by Raul Zurita, uh, Chilean, just genius. This book is titled Inri and translated by William Rowe. The poems in here aren't really titled so much. It's more of just, it gives the form of almost like a journal. Um, and I do believe, even in the description of this book, it's described as like something of like a long, um, like manifesto esque journal of like the Chilean journey. But I'm just going to read a few from here because, uh, I mean, we're so lucky to have as much work by Zurita as we have. I remember a journey by sea. At the horizon, the sky is infinitely diaphanous, and I hear the silence, and it becomes immense. Bruno was my friend. Susanna is now thousands of Susannas. The silence takes me back to an asphalt road beside the mountains and the small rabbit, stunned and motionless. I stop and go back. There is a small blood spot on its mouth, also on the fur at the neck. It weighs almost nothing in my hands. I hear the sound of the daisies as they bend. It has almost no weight. Its lightly reddened incisors seem to screech at the moon. Susanna has slightly red teeth. Her open mouth shows her slightly red teeth to the moon like a screech. In my imagination, I write devastated love letters. I think Zurita does a really good job of taking you from like the narrative moment and pushing it out into that like esoteric rambling. Um, I mean, just going from the image of a small stunned rabbit motionless to in my imagination, I write devastated love letters is such a beautiful distance to cover in 9 lines. Also, hi, Allie. Weird. Get out of here. No, I'm kidding. Um, if you have any requests, you can just hit me up. In the same way that the stones speak, that the earth speaks, I speak to you. And the blindness of my fingers speaks to you as they feel their way over your skull, your nose, your eye sockets, and the infinite sky has collapsed and speaks, rising out of the worm infested sockets of your eyes. And like a landscape of earth rising with the earth, our faces start to rise up out of our dead faces. And then, as the stones speak, as the earth speaks, I speak to you, corpse of me, love of me, bones of me, small round pupil of all the love that rises and is the song of your eyes looking at me. I can see you and looking at me, blind and looking at me, and blind like the whole sky looking at me, you look down at a country of deserts, and you see me, and you see me rising up, and you see me rising and rising, and your eyes see my eyes full of earth rising, winged, full of worms, but of light in the skies. Um, if you haven't read Raul Zurita, you absolutely should. Uh, Chilean poet. A lot of his poetry is translated into English. Um, and oh, it's just so good. Like this book in particular is just such a stunning work because it really does, it's a permission to follow narrative and to allow each moment to really like extrapolate into the zoning out. Um, he's definitely a love poet. I mean, clearly in that last poem, but um, or maybe infatuation. I don't know what the difference between love and infatuation is, but like he's a yearner of a poet if I've ever met one, and he incorporates his yearning and his infatuation into the landscape that he sees all around him. But I do love ending a love poem with the image of worms. Pretty hot. Next, next poet that I'm going to read is Mercedes Roffé. This is from a book titled Floating Lanterns and translated by Anna Dini. I really love Mercedes Roffé. She, if I remember correctly, she's a Mexican poet, but she might be Galician Spanish. Nope, Argentina. Wrong on both accounts. I apologize. Um, but uh, she was one of the first actually Argentinian poets that I read, and outside of maybe like was Pizarnik Argentinian? Um, yeah, she was. So probably Pizarnik first, and then Mercedes Roffé. But what I love about her work is that it really rambles from like it rambles in that like metaphysical sense that Octavio Paz really works uh, to death and then to rebirth and then to death once more. Um, but she's also in that tradition of like feminist poets who write longer poems, which I love. Uh, it's delightful because so much of her work is like bodily, image centric. There's a lot of love and eroticism in it. Um, however, she, yeah, she's just kind of badass in that way. She doesn't allow herself to be limited by, various constraints or like a feeling of need to be small. Also, I mean, I just personally like I can speak Spanish a little bit better, so I'd like to read. I tend to read more Spanish to English poetry in translation just because I feel more confident being able to read and parse the Spanish alongside the English. Um, but all of these poems in this book are just Roman numerals. So this is 15 XV. Yeah, 15. The poem is the face in the mirror, more true than the face and the mirror. The poem is the flow of blood beyond the body, the rhythm of blood beyond blood, its rigorous channels, its muffled and unitary beating. The poem is the rhythm of the other in me, beyond me, always beyond, where my silence comes up against your rhythm and reverberates in me, that I, sol fa, in the poem, a numinous rhythm, cipher that creates an echo in the echo that is true body, the numinous in you and me, the cycle of the spheres touching and abandoning each other, getting further away, yes, one from the other, but also unbinding itself of itself, each one in its golden, fecund negligence. In its rhythm, I unfold myself. In its metronome, capricious and fleeting, the universe unfolds its hallucinations, its truth. There is no possible translation. Or perhaps there is, of the one to oneself, of the one to what blindly searches and triumphs, of what it knows of itself, its poor empire. The poem, I say the music, I say the movement of dance in the body, the one of sculpted stone. And the music in the stroke and in the stone, I say, in the poem's steady and sinuous movement, learned cadence, the happiest fall in the crossing of all senses. El poema digo la música, digo el movimiento de la danza en el cuerpo, el de la piedra esculpida y la música en el trazo y en la piedra, digo, y el movimiento sinuoso y firme del poema, docta cadencia bellísima, caída en el cruce de todos los sentidos. I read the final stanza both in Spanish and English mostly because in English it does this really cool like translation tactic where there's a lot of consonants for the S sound. Um, you know, sculpted stone, stroke, stone, steady, sinuous, happiest, crossing senses. Um, and then in the Spanish, it actually is more consonant toward the C noise. Um, cuerpo, esculpida, musica, uh, cadencia, cruce, caída. It's uh, really cool to me. It's one of those things that like never ceases to amaze me that like a translator can pull off an accurate representational translation of a poem, maintaining like the metrical tricks and playfulness of the poem while still fundamentally changing what sounds are being conveyed. Um, like it's just really cool to me that like that is almost a one-to-one translation of how that final stanza ends, and yet the noises are just so different. I don't have like tremendously deep thoughts on that, other than like uh, it gives me this kind of like I don't know, like an inner calm when I think about how different interpretations of the same language can be, just even on a scale of like 7 total lines, 6 total lines. Um, when I think about it and apply that same logic into the grandiosity of like, you know, social anxieties or worrying about being able to be present. Um, and it is really just one of those kind of delightful moments of reminding myself that none of this, really matters insofar as all of it matters. And hello, my love. I will answer your text in a little bit, but I gotta keep reading poems for kind of myself, frankly. I gotta. There's a gun to my head. You can't see it. Next that I'm gonna read is called Beast, or from a book called Beast by Irene Sola. She's sure. I'm taking requests. Um, oh wow, you want me to read from Let the Moon Wobble? Um, it's a very short. This one is a very short book in particular. She's a Catalan poet, um, so Spanish language again. Um, impressively translate. I love people who translate themselves, but this is translated by herself alongside Oscar Holloway. Um, but like the actual book, like the poems involved are quite short. Like handful of lines each. Um, but interesting work, and uh, figure I'll read a couple in a row. Again, this is Beast by Irene Sola. With a coarse and serious tongue, I have washed the sour sweat from my neck and from the fold of my thighs. The night was black like Mirto, August in Sardinia, and you called to say you were lost. Irene. But I already wanted to be cured, and I wasn't your mother. Picking scabs is the only thing we do together. Your ass on a high chair, your blood like Coca Cola, and I have so little shame, so bramble and European, that I walk it with a cat carrier. I killed our dog because you didn't stop me. You sobbed out of fear like a child, and I on your lap. Bang! Now my heart weighs like a son of yours asleep, and I can't reach to lick him. Some of these books I haven't like thought of or read in quite a while. Um, and when I was going through and selecting these today, I picked this one mostly because like it's just kind of like all over the place, frankly. Um, I lifted my shirt up disdainfully for stones to be planted in my stomach, but I believe no father, not even mine. Yet I can purr like a cat. I have an understanding belly, discreet and attentive, like a lamb in a zoo, and butter breasts. Yo tambe em vai aromangar desdeñosa, perché em plantesin piñols all'estomac, pero ya no em crec capare ni el mío. Y mira que se ronca com un gat, tinc el ventre comprensio, discret y atent, com un zai en un zoo, y els pits de mantega. I like that zoo in Catalan is zoo. But yeah, she's a weirdo. Um, Pretty much every one of these poems, I mean, title of book is Beast, but they all have creatures in them, and I love me some creature poems. What's your request? What do you want to hear? And if it's to get me to do more work, okay. Yeah, I do. I'm happy to do anything, anything. Um, but I just have a short stack that I kind of go through. Um, I don't know. I don't really think too much about these other than the anxiety of feeling cringy and going live reading poems, but um, why not? Nip, get nipped. I have no idea what Substack's policy on nip showing is. So if it uh if I get banned from my Substack because of you, uh I don't care. It's whatever. Get nipped. Um the next book that I wanted to read was Ship of Gold. Um and I love this book mostly because it has the audacity to call it Essential Poems of Émile Nelligan. I believe a Quebecois, like French Canadian, um, and translated by Mark D. Saverio, uh, who is an Ontario translator. Um, I really, I really just love like the audacity of calling any work of poetry essential. You know, like essential to whom? Um, I guess to me and to you in this moment, as I'm going to read them. But it is a very fun kind of tactic. I think more books should be more audacious with who they're for. Can you imagine, like, selected poems selected for those who wish to maintain their godliness? Those who do not read these poems will suffer from a wrath that is from a vindictive and angry God, as like the subtitle of Let the Moon Wobble. The Crows. I thought I saw within my soul a swarm of crows above a moor, mid funereal flight, over crows from famous mountain peaks, crows who fly by moon and torches light, like a zero that narrows over an open tomb, a gyre whiffing zebra carrion. They soared in the icy shivers of our gloom, swinging massive meat strips in their bills. Now the fallen prey of these night fiends was nothing more than my blighted life, where vast tragedies converged and down-circled fast, pitilessly ripping, with their stabbing pecks of beaks, my soul, scattered across the field of my days, which these old crows will swallow always. I think most, if not all, of these poems have a off rhyme scheme to them, which is additionally always an impressive thing to consider in translation, mostly because it's very difficult to accomplish a poem that maintains a rhyme scheme when translated into English. I mean, phonic languages are so substantially different from one another. You can imagine a rhyme scheme being maintained when translating between like Latinate languages, but especially translating between like a Latinate and a Germanic, um, or uh, Germanic into a Pacific or Asian, Southeast Asian in particular. Like it's borderline impossible to think of a maintained rhyme scheme in that way. I'd like to hide. I would like to hide inside of laughter, in roars of crowds upon the rafter. Yes, I would truly fool me numb in whirlwinds of delirium. What a shame! What leeches go sucking on my bleeding heart. Oh God, I wish I'd go insane if just to thwart my worst distresses. Hidden like some horrendous cadaver, the vessel of my soul is moored with the vile heteromorphic horde. Let me bless those hateful fiends whose blasts of laughter, wild dents, deride the virgin intelligence. They're so like it's so like dramatic in the way of like early 20th century, late 19th century like sermon kind of era. And I believe this person is quite like a known religious figure. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, 1879. Um, it's so like so fascinating, so absolutely fascinating to go from like Azurita or Irene Sola, and they're like kind of creatures lending themselves to like that symbolic gesture of the world. Something pops and allows them this kind of figure of reflection into like, no, these crows just showed up and I know this is divine retribution. Like my soul is fucked. I am going to get sundered by crows because I God hates me. The robin in the woods. Yesterday, while we were reading Werther, deep in woods, a robin sang upon a bough, and I grabbed your hands. I took your white hands, and I spoke of love as I had before. But you remained so stony to my voice, silent to this young man's frank affections. You suddenly stood, ran through periwinkles, moved, calling, crying to me, look, here is what fell from the shivering tree, the sentimental bird stuck in his young age who would die soon, poor soul of spring. You wept for him, regretting his romance, while I was thinking, fixed on huge blue skies, both love and robin died at the same time. Yeah, I'll finish this book. Um, like I won't read more from this individual, but uh, I don't think they're necessarily tremendously complicated. Uh, I don't feel called to like really deeply investigate these poems other than the fact that like honestly, like when I read stuff like that, I'm like, that would be a really good introductory poem. Um, like they're complicated enough that they have like more than just like a straightforward gesture. The title doesn't directly tell people what they're supposed to get out of the poem. Um, they deploy certain tactics for like literary motifs. They have rhyme, they have meter, they have imagery and metaphor, all that kind of stuff. Uh, and I mean, a good school loves a good religious poet, but yeah, there's no fucking way I would ever see this book in an undergraduate classroom or a high school classroom, anywhere, frankly. But um, just thoughts that I have about these works. Like accessibility is something that um, I mean, I think you and I both are experienced enough like readers of poetry that like complicatedness doesn't really jar us. But I mean, on average, most people are quite jarred and jostled by how complex or inaccessible a poem is. So I don't know. Fun to read a little poem from a virgin looking at a robin holding hands and having his first wet dream. Gallo, Gallo Gigliotto. I want to say Italian. No, Chilean. Very wrong. Um, I should have known because it's from Coem Press, which does a tremendous amount of like South American in translation and Spanish language poetry in translation. But cool book, big book, like wise. It's a book called Valdivia, translated by Daniel Borzitsky. Um, and something that Cohen Press does in particular is they do like the poems in English are all in one part, but then the poems in Spanish are look upside down. So literally it gives the kind of visceral reaction of a different book by forcing you to flip something. Again, collection of poems, they're all just numbers. A lot of people don't title their poems these days, I find. Or maybe that's just a trait of translated poetry. Who can say? 23. You have no idea how the nightmares hounded me. From Valdivia, they tracked me everywhere for a long time. I was only 4 or 5 years old. We had just run away. We were living in a small apartment in Quilicura. It didn't have a bed. When we fled, we brought nothing. I slept in an inflatable boat, courtesy of Bayer Laboratories. The boat was red and yellow, decorated with images of spiders, flies, fleas, and ticks in white ink. The boat advertised an insecticide, and its size was just right for me. The nightmares formed a substratum in my head, an incredibly prolific bacterial infection in my unconscious states. My fever shot up when the stuffed dinosaurs came, with their threatening cotton fangs under those hate filled eyes. It was said my father looked for us with dogs. It was said he was a powerful man, that his fury spilled out through the cities, but no one told him we were hiding. In my uncle's house, no one told my father that my nightmares were terrible, that almost every night I would wake up suffocated by a hysterical howl, a vampire's claws, white wormy skin squeezing my neck. I would wake up right after the armies would drop their last bombs in the countryside of my dreams, right after having seen how they shredded those who were my friends, the robots attacking me, burying their swords in my spindly legs and slashing me up from bottom to top, the blades of fear deboning my soul after having seen mobs of cartoon characters coming to lynch me. There was Goofy, Donald Duck, Mickey and Minnie, Tom and Jerry, with their sharp claws and monstrous faces, holding belts in their blood-stained hands. And they would walk towards me until they almost touched me, and they would try to slice my flesh, to split me open, to jam a knife into my skin near my knees. But I would run away because I would wake up, or my mother would wake me up when she heard my screams and she came to take me out of my bed and stick me in hers and change my sweat drenched pajamas. Then I would go back to sleep, but my father never heard this. Perhaps if he would have silenced his dogs, he might have heard me, and he would have come to me. He would have heard me screaming from any of these Chilean nights, and he would have come to me if he would have silenced his dogs. But that didn't happen. I don't know why, but it didn't happen. Didn't happen. Maybe that's best. They say you should never write a poem about your dreams, or you shouldn't write about your dreams because they're only interesting to you. Uh, and I think that is a good beginner rule, a good rule of thumb. Most dreams are not really that compelling to write about. Uh, but damn, sometimes you get a banger of a dream and you're just like, oh, this is going to be a great poem. And I like to imagine that Gallo Giliotto uh, absolutely knew that their dreams were banger enough to write about, or nightmares, I should say, as it explicitly describes. Um, I won't read more from that collection, mostly because uh, it's just kind of a bummer, like some naturally, like reading poetry in translation, you're going to come across all number of poems that are like fear responses and avoidance of like borderline genocidal conditions and sadness, numbness, um, mostly because for a lot of the world, like poets are writing in response to the conditions that invading countries are subjecting them to, whether it's bombing a city constantly or uh, borderline enslaving a population and forcing them to dig rare earth or, all of that good stuff. And so it's another reason why I like reading poetry in translation so much is because um, it is sort of a way for me to get my news. I distrust so much of mainstream media these days that it's just like, what if I just read this translated poetry and now I have a better history lesson than fucking like CNN would ever give me. That all said, I think I'm just going to read from one more person. And this is, I don't know if you've read them, but Ghassan Zaktan, Palestinian writer. This is just a selected poems translated by Fadi Judah. Uh, I've read a couple of his individual works, um, and this is just a pretty vast selection of everything. Um, but yeah, I would be remiss not to read Palestinian in translation in any of these just because, I don't know, it's just so important to maintain their artistry, the sheer breadth of poetry that they produced. So I'll read a few. Rain. We have entered the language of clouds. The weather is all over. Will you open your umbrella or turn off the rain? We only held our children's toys in our hands. Stillness. There are two paintings and a long bench and a cloth rose that has slackened over dust. There is coffee and a stove alight and a foreboding aloneness that's wrapped itself in the silence of two. In their absence there is war. The rose woven into their clothes is war. War is our new house, our loyal dog, our wedding party, the familiarity of ruin, war is loam in our finger webs. Are the two of us enough? And the minutes that make promises to us with a slow dance and the liquor that passes through the curtains of this place, are they enough? A scream over the woods. In the dark, there's room for a black hand with 5 fingers and an arm. In the dark, a house is consumed with the chores of its dead who are consumed with transferring their intentions to the arch. In the dark, ruined voices, screams that remained on rocks and in nettle fences and in the courtyard's water like rough bark. A scream appears over the woods. In the dark, where the past roams around the ladder, folded like a cold shirt, the hearts of the dead stumble. And the rustle of their stroll in the hallway is like a blind plant or a pair of consenting eyes. The ladder goes on, leaning alone toward a whiteness the arches diminish. And no time is enough for them, no time, and let it down. They hold their intentions white, their solitude within them. Did we cross someone's mind before we rose in the dark, stung with our image, white from sleep's effect, while arches branched out of us haggard and grew faint in the hallways? Who thought of us? We, the forgotten, who boarded vehicles to exile and returned forgotten without vehicles. I think they all of the poems that I've read from Zaktan are just so loaded with just such heart-wrenching imagery. The parallels between, ruin, rubble, uh, creatures, sounds, smells, and then the everyday, grief of, how will I be able to come home to my loved ones? Um, it's just extraordinary. But that last poem, just echoing the question of will they remember us, is so heartbreaking. I think that's where I will end. Any final requests or thoughts besides more nip showing? Because I don't want to do it twice in one video. That's too much. Too slutty. If not, then thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed. I will see you soon. Love you so much. Bye.